my name is Mr. Doctor. I am a physics teacher for those of you guys who don't know me yet or haven't been in my class. Maybe you're underclassmen. Physics is some class you'll take your junior year. And I love the book Scythe because a lot of the references to the characters are actually physics people, scientists. Right? So for my breakout session, I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. Why did Scythe Faraday pick that scientist in particular? And how did other Scythes kind of choose a scientist? And what does that mean? What connotations does that have for the book? And what can that lead you to trust or to believe about this story? So today we're looking at Scythe Faraday from the book versus Michael Faraday, the scientist that he chose his name by. The overarching theme of our topics today, just if you didn't read the descriptor, if you're here randomly or just trying to fulfill the requirement, we're talking about Michael Faraday, the physicist, and how he was chosen for the Scythe name. Why would it not be a coincidence? What connections can we make from that? And what does that tell us about Scythe Faraday's character? So this is our description. If you would like to look it up in your document, the thing the math teacher posts, you're welcome to do so. But that's just an overview of what we're looking at today. That's all right. So our first question is, why does Scythe choose scientists? Obviously, we're going to talk about Faraday. He's the main topic of our conversation today. But I pulled a couple others. Right? Scythe Curie, Scythe Goddard, High Size Xenocrates, Scythe Volta. Right? There's more that we could pull up, right? I just pulled up a few. Why did Scythes choose scientists?
What do you think, guys? That's like
What do you guys think?
Because they're representing
Representing what?
famous people, people that helped a bunch in society.
Okay, I like that idea, right? It's the idea that Scythes are trying to help society, right? Because it's not just famous. Why wouldn't we have Scythe Michael Jordan?
Because he's a basketball player.
Right? So the Scythes are trying to show, that contribution. That has a certain meaning, right? So if we're reading through this book, the Scythes are supposed to be contributing to society in some way. Why do they mostly pick scientists? When we hear about scientists right now, right? If you look out into the world and you hear this scientist discovered this, or this scientist showed us this, or we had this activity, why do we usually trust scientists?
Because they're super smart.
So intelligence, maybe we think they're super smart. Are all scientists super smart?
No.
Not necessarily. Maybe in a specific field or area, but that doesn't mean they're overall like the smartest people on the planet. Why else might we trust a scientist?
They know what they're talking about. They have a degree.
Okay, maybe they have a degree. Maybe we trust that they know what they're talking about.
Maybe they've gone through trial and error to prove a theory.
Right? Maybe they've gone through trial and error to prove a theory. Should we blindly trust a scientist all the time? Not really. Does science get proven and changed over time? Sometimes it does. So as we look through this, sometimes science is going to change. Sometimes it's going to, we'll build on a theory, right? Change a theory, right? So the scientists from, 400 years ago, maybe we change some stuff up. Maybe we revolutionize that. Maybe we come up with new ideas. So when we talk about these Scythe scientists, right? There's one other thing that is important when you're a scientist. What do you do when you run an experiment? What if you discover something? What do you try to do? You try to prove it, and what do you do with your results? You publish it, right? We're in the library. Can we look up a scientific journal and see what people publish?
Yeah.
What did the Scythes do after they kill someone?
They write it down in their journal.
They write it in the journal, which is
Bad about
published.
themselves.
Is that important for our society to be able to
Yeah.
read those publishings?
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's science sharing ideas or it's Scythes sharing their journals. Why would the people care about that?
So they know that they're not crazy people.
Okay, so they know they're not crazy.
Part of their history.
It's part of their history. If we lived in this world of Scythe, would you want to know why someone was killed?
No.
Yeah.
Maybe, especially if it's your, brother, sister, mom, dad. If you thought your mom was going to live for 100 years and all of a sudden she's gone, maybe you want to read that journal, right? In science, we do the same thing. We share ideas. We publish ideas because it helps other people know what we're doing, where we're coming from. So I think a big part of the Scythes is that they're choosing these figures that are supposed to be notable, that are supposed to be respectable, that hopefully have some sort of method or greater intelligence, right? Maybe they're good, beneficial people, they're important to society, but they also share the results, right? What do they do at the Scythe conventions with the data they collect? They compare them, right? Can they tell if one side's being racist?
Yeah.
Right? So they're using that data just like a scientist would, right? They can tell if you're gleaning too many people that have children or too many people from a certain area, right? So they go over that data, and if they get caught doing something wrong or just not doing it, you know, putting as much effort in, they get put on probation, right? And they tell you got to glean these people. So that's part of science as well. So just as a heads up, like there's a lot of reasons these Scythes might choose scientists. So kind of getting on to the one that impressed me most in the book. I teach physics, so it's really easy for me to like Michael Faraday.
Yeah.
Scythe Faraday, right, is one of the main characters.
Why are you doing this one? Because it's not bad.
Well, because all the teachers volunteer.
Yeah.
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 All the teachers read it.
Yeah.
So.
I don't know if there's any math people
There isn't.
presenting. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I like this one the most. He was my favorite character in the book
Me too.
for a variety of reasons, but also Michael Faraday is someone we talk about and research in my class. So when we talk about Michael Faraday, we're gonna just do a brief overview of who he is, what he did, kind of what he discovered as a scientist. So Michael Faraday was an English scientist who contributed to the study of electromagnetism and electrochemistry. His main discoveries are about electromagnetic induction, diamagnetism, and electrolysis. Right, so this guy lived at a time where electricity wasn't a big deal. It's hard to imagine. 300 years ago, even less than that, 230 years ago, electricity wasn't something you had in your house. Right? They had gas lamps, oil lamps. Right? We were hunting whales for their blubber to consolidate it down for oil for our lamps. Right? We didn't have televisions or electronics or anything like that, and this guy's pretty much the guy who kicked that era off. Right? He's the one who discovered that you don't have to have a chemical reaction to make electricity happen. You can actually use physics. You can use actual materials, which made it a huge difference, what kind of discovery. So he lived to be 75 years old, in a very, very full life. So we're going to compare just a little bit before we get into too many details, just his life in general. Who was he as a person, right? Because these Scythes in the book, they're not necessarily scientists, but they're people too, right? So Scythe Faraday had some characteristics that were similar to the real life guy. The real life Faraday grew up very poor. He barely had enough food to eat, right? He really enjoyed home-cooked meals. It was a real treat when his mom could put enough food on the table for like a feast or a holiday. What was the first thing we learned about Scythe Faraday?
He was poor. Or again, he only kept enough food for himself in the
Yeah.
house.
He didn't hoard anything. He only kept enough food for himself. And what's the first thing he did in the book? Like the first, I don't know, 2 or 3 pages.
I forgot.
How do we get introduced to Scythes anyway?
Oh, didn't
He
like
killed
the-
that. He killed the most important kid.
He went into the apartment
He went into the apartment,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And he asked them
For dinner.
for dinner.
to dinner, right? He wanted that home-cooked meal. So, if you don't mind, push it just one time.
Okay, sorry, yeah,
It's
sorry.
like a, it's
This
like a
is our
period
first
slide,
time working
right?
together.
Scythe Faraday enjoys home-cooked meals, right? He doesn't hoard the food. He kind of keeps his pantry bare. He doesn't go out and get extravagant stuff, right? He's not that Scythe that's going to a restaurant and be like, oh, I want to order one of everything. Give me the lobster and steak. He's the guy who kind of has plain meals, right? So that kind of reflects the character of Michael Faraday. Like, he grew up so poor that one of the stories that I read, he only had one loaf of bread to last him the whole week. His parents were like, here's your loaf of bread this week, good luck. Right? Maybe you go eat some grass or some dirt cakes or something, but you didn't have much food growing up. Another thing about the real life Faraday is he served as an apprentice twice. What do we know about Scythes? They serve as an apprentice before they get appointed a Scythe, right? So he had to serve as an apprentice. The first one he served to was a bookmaker. What does Scythe Faraday make them do? Make his apprentices do? Read half of
they
their.
make them do all these assignments, do books.
Right? He makes them do old school books. Right? It's kind of weird for them to have to deal with books, but the real life Michael Faraday, he worked in a bookshop. Right? That's where he learned to read. That's where he started to educate himself. His family was too poor to send him to a college or anything. So the real Scythe Faraday, right? He had two apprentices. Reading was half of their curriculum. It was half of their studies. Right? They had reading and then they had weapons training and physical study. But he made it a really big deal. This reading is important. These old school books, handling the books was important to him. The real life Michael Faraday conducted numerous experiments and tried multiple methods of testing his results. This guy worked for decades, right? He tried to figure out all these different things. Maybe you've heard the story of Thomas Edison and how many different filaments he put in a light bulb. This guy tested not just light bulbs, he tested all sorts of stuff. As we go through some of the things he developed and some of the things he's credited for, you'll see he tested things a lot of different ways. What did Scythe Faraday do that varied? Scythe Faraday, sorry.
You never used the same weapon?
He didn't use the same weapon twice. He didn't use the same method, right? That's pretty inventive. That's pretty creative, that's pretty unique, right? Scythe Faraday's reasoning was a little different, right? He wanted to give them dignity of death, but he still varied his weapons. How much time do you think it took him to come up with
All
that?
of it. A couple of years.
A while, right? Did he just go out and willy-nilly stab 5 people and be like, oh, that's my quota
How
this
old
month?
was he? How old does it tell us?
So in the book, remember how they can reset?
Well, no, I know that, but like, did it ever tell us how old he was?
I don't remember a specific age, except that he was one of the oldest. So around 200, roughly, 200, 250. Because yeah, he wasn't the oldest, but he was one of the oldest, and they said he'd only reset twice, I think. No. I read it this summer, like June, July, so it's been a little bit. But. All right, so yeah, he tried multiple methods. And then finally, the real life Faraday, he gets really old, and he starts to get a little senile, a little bit crazy, but people respected him for what he had contributed to society. So the Queen of England gifted him a cottage. She's like, here's the cottage, kind of get you out of the city, get you, calm down, you can't annoy people, you can't talk crazy to the nursing staff, all this kind of stuff. And in the book, what does Scythe Faraday do when he decides he doesn't want to do it anymore?
Lives in hiding.
He sneaks away to a cottage. Now, it doesn't give you enough detail in the book to say if it's the same cottage as the actual Michael Faraday. Obviously, it's probably not. But it is kind of amusing that both of them decide, hey, let's just kind of retire to a cottage and be away from society, be away from the city. All right, next one, please. So we're talking about scientific importance, right? I'm a science teacher, kind of want to make sure we understand why is this important. So Michael Faraday was known as the father of the electric motor, the electric generator, the electric transformer, and electrolysis. Without these devices, we would not have electricity today. Has anyone here seen like LG&E or how that works? Power
They use
plant.
a bunch of coal.
Yeah, we use a bunch of coal, and what do they do with that coal? When they burn
run
it,
it down, and then
it spins a big turbine.
Yeah,
And what does that turbine do?
do heat.
It cranks a generator that produces energy, right? Produces electric current. Essentially, he started this process. He's the one that's credited with making the discovery that allowed this to happen. Right? Before him, they thought, hey, kind of like a battery, we can make a little bit of electricity, but our materials are going to run out really quick. It's not going to be powerful. It's not going to last very long. He discovered you could take a magnet and put it between a coil of wire and make an electric current. Now that's all we do. Right? We just go, we take a power plant, we take super strong magnets, we run them through or spin them through wires, and that creates our electric current. Right? We do there's a couple other steps. We do step up and step down transformers to transmit it to our homes. Right? We have some safety devices added in between so that we don't electrocute ourselves or burn stuff down. But essentially, he's the reason we have electricity as we know it today. He wrote a couple of laws, was known for a couple of effects, right? The law of induction, the Faraday effect, right? He showed that light and electromagnetism are related, which if you're in my physics class, we're gonna talk about that in the spring. He discovered that you can use electricity to separate matter, right? If you're in chemistry, you start to discover atoms have charges. And he used that idea. And then in addition to the dynamo, which if you were here last year, we heard a lot about dynamos and how they make electricity on bicycle wheels from that book. This guy invented the Faraday cage, which is a really cool thing that helps absorb electricity around you and protect you from getting shocked.
Pardon the interruption. Daniel Smith, please report to the rotunda.
Daniel Smith.
Daniel Smith to the rotunda, please.
So for this next one, I just wanted to pull just a couple things to kind of help you understand or comprehend how easy some of these experiments were, but how groundbreaking. So our first video, we'll fast forward to the 312 mark. This is from Bill Nye, yeah, that favorite of everyone, seems like. Let me pull it up on the screen.
And wiggling that needle. Something.
Hit pause, and you know what you have to do is you have to go to your display settings.
Just do F3.
Yeah, and then duplicate. Yeah, no, you're there now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So good old Bill Nye is pretty excitable. So I pulled just a brief clip of him.
So where does electricity come from, anyway? Well, in 1831, two scientists figured out how to make electricity. It was Michael Faraday, working in Britain, and Joseph Henry, working in the United States. At about the same time, they both did an experiment, something like this. Michael Faraday took a coil of wire, and he moved it over a magnet. And when he did, electricity started to flow in this coil. The electricity went down over here to another coil and made a compass needle move. Well, Michael Faraday was doing this experiment for an audience, and the woman came up to him afterwards and said, Mr. Faraday, of what use is it? And he said, Madam, will you tell me the use of a newborn child? And what he meant was, would you take a look? I mean, I'm moving the compass needle without touching it. You understand? I have a coil of wire way over here, and I'm making a compass needle move way over there with no apparent force. I mean, some force is going right through the air and wiggling that needle. Something's happening here. Some spectacular effect is happening here. You know, I may not completely understand it right now with no apparent force. One day we will, and it's going to be a big deal. Thank you for joining me on...
All right, so as he shows, they didn't necessarily understand the implications of what they discovered, but once we started applying that to more modern technologies, it got to be huge. Right? That was something that helps us have electricity today. The other thing I wanted to show is an experiment you can try out at home. That's really easy to do. It's only about a 2-minute video, but we'll skip through it. that's something super easy you can try out, but Michael Faraday is the one that's giving credit for coming up with those concepts that were needed in order to make that happen. So as we start to wrap up, the book impact, right, for Scythe Faraday, he was the introduction to scythe culture, right? He was the first one we discovered as a scythe, kind of explained to us what a scythe is, what they do. He was the first scythe in their tradition to take multiple apprentices, probably related to regular Michael Faraday, who was an apprentice, right? He knew the power of that. Did you have a comment?
And then, what about Scythe Goddard? Didn't he do the same?
So they were, I believe, scythes that he took up onto, not like apprenticed them all at the same time. He was old school, right? He had old school methods, old school teaching ideals, and he was all about fighting that corruption, making sure, to try to change that system for the better. So hopefully you guys can see those parallels between scientists and scythes. Why would they pick scientists for the book? What does that mean? And also a little bit about Michael Faraday and maybe how Scythe Faraday chose that character, how he determined, what was important to him, how did he relate, and how cool actual Michael Faraday was, how important he was for us. So I appreciate you guys all coming to my talk. If you guys have any questions, feel free, come to my room, ask it anytime. See you guys later.
Thank you.
Quick question.